The Proleptic Journal of a Shite-Extractor Tractor Man by Scott Waller. 12. 1 day later. Amazingly, the strapping chair didn't work properly today either. There was no way I was going to report it now, not after yesterday. For the first time in my life, I felt truly angry about things. I did wonder why CE owners are shy of the public gaze. If they look like the CE owner of cheerily, then they'd better not show themselves. I wouldn't mind if it was to help those who need it, but we're not giving the best part of ourselves for the needy, but for the greedy. Why does it all have to nourish a repugnant, lardy lump? It's all too unbearable to think about, but think about it I have. It kept me up half the night, and think about it I shall. I've been watching the kind of neuromentaries about history that I used to think were boring and complicated. I have to make sense of all this. 1 day later. I'm getting quite used to my dysfunctional strapping pod. I'm beginning to realise what I've been missing. I would have had to have waited for retirement to feel this free. But by that time my mind and body will hardly be in fit working order, and I won't have the same attitude to life. I'd like to enrich my mind before it's too late. I remember what one guy on a neuromentary says. When you've got the energy of a self-enriching study, you are unavailable to devote yourself to it. When you've finally got time for such study, you no longer have the taste for it. I suppose it's all calculated that way. As Niall used to say, when you're finally free of the demands of the system, you're too worn out to do anything to upset the social order. I still haven't heard from Faye. I sometimes worry that something might have happened to her. I remember her saying before she left that I would have to learn to be strong if I was going to be free from servile attachments, and that makes sense, but I still plain miss her. I'm beginning to worry that the guardians of sleep will notice that I'm not half napping enough. The fact that I watch too many intellectual neuromentaries about history and society instead of brain slouching and neurodramas will probably arouse suspicion sooner or later, as will my rejecting of all the hedinocorrector suggestions for the cheery neuros they keep trying to fob off on me. I did try a couple of their neuro games, but they just seem so pointless. These stupid automated guardian machines see me thinking and probably interpret it as brooding, which triggers the diagnosis of unhappiness. Maybe they're programmed like that, because too much pondering, according to some aggregate calculation, correlates with unhappiness. Or perhaps the programs are designed to stop us thinking, because thinking is dangerous. That's what the dissidents would say. I ought to go and see them, and tell them about my adventures. I might meet someone who has news about Faye this time. I have things to tell her now. Maybe that's what she wanted. For me to grow individually without her. I also have questions for the dissidents. I close my eyes and think. I'm becoming restless with unbounded energy. Sometimes I think I'll get ill if things keep going on like this. I feel the burden of isolation because of all this vitality, all this new information, and the new thoughts simmering away inside. At least I've got you. But you never reply. 3 days later. I've spent a whole week without having my energy drained from me, and I feel on top of the world. My head's not used to so much mental activity. It's used to being constantly active, on a low-intensity basis in the strap-in, inundated with games, neurovids, and ad flushes. But this is a new way of being active. The brain works on its own steam, without stimulants, without the adrenaline of games, without the euphoria of neurovids, without external guiding. I'm learning so much on the educational neurolibrary, that I'm not sure I'll have time to speak right about it all. I went back to see the dissidents. There was no one I knew, and I mostly avoided conversation. I asked people if they had seen someone called Faye, and when they said they hadn't, I kept on moving. Everybody in that world seems to come and go as the wind takes them. After a while of wandering around the little green oasis, I chatted to a guy with a friendly face who had the habit of gazing into the air as he spoke. I enjoyed sharing my observations and reflections about society. I told him about my sighting of the CE owner and how I realized the lower strata are robbed of their life energy through strap-ins by the Darvosians. He listened calmly and attentively. He was interested in my adventures, slightly shocked at what I had witnessed, but not surprised. He has never seen a real CE owner. This made me feel special. He explained the history behind it as he saw it, how things had developed slowly over time from a society in which equality and social justice were ideals to be striven for in the face of the obvious hurdle of the drive to exploit, to a society that had abandoned the ideals and embraced the hurdle. The hypocrisy of egalitarian discourses became glaring once inequalities crystallized, so new discourses explaining the benefits of structural inequalities emerged. That seemed to square up with some of the rarer and more complicated neurometries I've seen, although they have a habit of not expressing the obvious in blunt terms. 3 days later. Crap, and more crap. That's all I can say. The strap-in has corrected itself. Everything is back to normal. I have no more energy left to speak right. I'd got used to being rid of the demands of the great societal leech. I don't even have the energy to do the quick interactive games I used to do to relax after work. Even Dopey Dolly has noticed how done in I look. She offered to relieve me with her delicate hands and agile vibro mouth. I assented, but could not go through with it. I just wasn't in the mood. Crap. Will I be able to cope with normality anymore? I'm going into deep sleep mode. Crap. 1 day later. Oh God, I'm in for it. I got the summons from the CBOD, Company Bureau of Discipline, *. I have to be there tomorrow. I bet they know about the whole thing. Leaving my post, entering a forbidden area, spying on the chief executive owner. I'm done for. They'll get rid of me. I just know it. I should have known. I did, but I couldn't stop myself. And therein lies your problem, they'll say. At my age, they will leap on any pretext to dump me on the scrap heap. That was the kind of thing Niall would say. It all seemed too easy, too good to be true. No strap-in, no life force sucked out of me, left with a dangerous mental capacity to question the social order, wandering anywhere at will. There had to be a catch somewhere. I remember Itzel in one of her poetic narrations saying that some companies deliberately set traps to make their employees commit a professional fault so that they could dump them without paying their full PES entitlements. How can I be sure that I wasn't a victim of something like that? As Niall said, these things don't have to be the initiative of an individual manager. A generation ago, when there were still mainly human program designers, consultant programmers received strategic instructions to inject this kind of weeding out mechanism into company systems. From then on, many automated systems have been simply finding new ways of enacting a general command made years ago, working out the details themselves on how to catch the employee out. The automated program probably spotted me as someone likely to fall for it and tried it out on me. If so, there will be no trace of who tricked me. The failure of the strap-in pod would appear as a computer fault, if it appeared at all. And if it does show up, of course I'll be blamed for not reporting it. I saw something like this in a neurodrama ages ago. I'm done for. What can I do now? I'm useless to society. My neurons have been wired up to the Shinley system so long that they won't be able to adapt to another company. I haven't the funds for a proper retirement. I'll have to bring forward my PES. I'll see what my advisor says. I can still get some kind of blowout PES. That way, I'll get the highest necessary accumulated entitlement to live on for a handful of years before handing over my body Perhaps my organs might be worth a little too. Handing over my body. More like handing back my body. My body never truly belonged to me in the first place. It's always belonged to them. I've been filled up with their propaganda, which has made me imagine that what was most intimately mine was truly mine. The dissidents got it right. They reclaimed their bodies from the system. If only I had the courage to join them. Could I do it now? For Faye, yes. But for the memory of Faye? Without her, I wouldn't have the strength. Or worse, what if I met up with her again and she took up other lovers? Would I be able to cope with that? Oh, why am I so cowardly in my thinking? It's not that I'm really jealous. It's not the idea of her having sex with another man that hurts. Although I wouldn't exactly stand around jotting dispassionate notes if I happened to be in the vicinity. It's the idea that she might decide never to be with me again. I'd be lost. 1 day later. My meeting with the CBOD has been postponed. I've no idea why. I'm so disorientated. I needed to speak about my adventures, so I coughed up to Dolly. I doubt if she understood half of it, but she did say something that struck me. You must act now, or the event will crush you. She's programmed to give vague encouragement like that. They call it the astronomy advice functionality. She's full of sayings that sound very wise when you first hear them, but I've heard most of them a few times over now, and they don't always pop up at the right moment, so they can ring hollow or belly flop like a fluff joke. If the platitude she comes out with happens to fit the situation, it's usually only in an approximate way, but this time she hit the mark. She's right. I must do something now. I can't wait around for it to happen to me. But what to do? I'm not cut out for the outcast life, but I did have this crazy idea of going to live in one of the more amenable radiplazes. People say that they are not as bad as is made out if you've saved a bit of money. Ages ago, I visited a couple of these places that aren't too uninhabitable. I spoke anonymously to a mechanoid Pez advisor on the Slipnet, who said that I could cash in my Pez and live reasonably well for a good while in a half-decent radiplaz. Or I could take the blowout Pez option and live fewer years like a pasha. I don't know yet. It's just an idea. But I have to do something. 2 days later. Things have moved quickly. Just do it, as the old proverb goes. Well, I'm doing it. I've started the process of modifying my Pez option. I've made the first step to apply for a Pez cash-in blowout. It's funny. I remember saying that suicide was illegal. In reality, I am in fact committing that supposedly illegal act under the auspices of the law and with the tacit approval of our upper stratum overlords. The only difference is that my suicide comes with a time lag. So be it. I want to get my energy back, the way I was when I was young, the way I was when being with Faye rejuvenated me, the way I was when the strapping chair wasn't working. I want to do things, to travel, to meet people, to learn things firsthand. True, the dark shadow of death will hang over everything I do in the years to come, but I must do my best to live what I have fully. Gone the duty of serving one's company loyally, slavishly. I have a new duty, to thrive. I must go out, discover, meet people like myself. I'll take a life of brief but genuine freedom. Yes, this ending will be a great new beginning. And who knows, perhaps in the radiplazes there are ways of escaping the Pez euthanasia sentence. Perhaps there are places you can hide from the Pez debt police. I doubt it, but you never know. Just trying will be exciting. Out there, I'll have to put up with things I'm not used to. I'll have to sacrifice comforts I take for granted. But maybe it'll be worth it in the end. I don't know. I'm scared. 1 day later. I've been trying to find out as much as possible about a particular radiolipase that interests me. It's an area that used to be of temperate climate in your day, but became definitively semi-tropical just over half a century ago. Today it's hot and arid 3/4 of the year, and then becomes humid for 3 months, and incredibly stormy for about one of those. It's dead cheap. People are sociable and have to invent a lot of their own solutions to their problems. There are thousands of places to visit. In some ways, the poorer folk seem to know how to appreciate life more than us. Many of them work hard, but they still manage to keep a big smile on their face. They have a more positive outlook on life. Maybe the more a society has, the more complicated things get. Maybe the more society looks after our happiness, the less spontaneously joyful we become. I don't know. Maybe I'm talking nonsense. After all, radioplases obviously resent us. Who can blame them? They get a tough deal. I wouldn't like as much if I were them. But will they think of me as one of the bad guys? The money we earn on this side of the wall will go a lot further on their side. But what if they see me as nothing more than a walking wallet? What if all my relations with others are based on paying for services? The idea of living in a radiolipase once filled me with horror. Now it fills me with excitement tinged with anxiety. Life is not the same there. People aren't used to the luxuries we have here. Yet, as far as I can gather, their sense of need has a different meaning to ours. Although there are no needy in this part of the world, there is a constant, gnawing, indefinable need. It's that need I need to escape. But could I ever fit in there? I have no choice but to find out. I must try to carve a little place for myself in unknown territory. Perhaps I'll be able to get in touch with Faye again and get her to come and visit me. We would have fun like in the old times. I won't give up my search for her. I'll have more time. When I do find her, if she sees how much I have changed, she might want to spend time with me. Who knows? I'll have the opportunity to be a brave new me in a brave new world. 1 day later. I've just received notice that my meeting with the CBOD is tomorrow. I'll doubtlessly have to face the human management boss himself. I'm scared. By chance, on my way home, I saw a repossession vehicle. As I understand it, they take away your work-related valuables from your home. It's just occurred to me, if they do that to me, it will mean a bit of bad news as far as this journal is concerned, for I won't have the equipment to send off my installments. The dispatch system is dependent on material on my home system provided by Cheerily. Tomorrow might be the last time we communicate. I'm not sure I feel the need to speak right anymore. I'm going to try and concentrate on living rather than talking about life. Still, it's been nice speak writing to you. Even if you are pig ignorant with your persistently non-existent reply, nobody's perfect. 1 day later. Big surprise. Guess who was there when I got summoned to the office? It wasn't the human management boss as I expected. It was Dennis. It was a pleasant turn up for the book seeing that face, with its electronic goggles and his circuited suit, sitting in the manager's chair. As soon as I clapped eyes on him, I almost melted with relief, but I stayed composed, since it was an official meeting all the same. He sat me down in a professional but relaxed manner. He did not have brilliant news to impart, though I was glad it came from him. He said that there were reports about my change in comportment, and the SOPs, staff observation programs, had noticed an inexplicable decline in ad intake. There was also a marked decrease in my energy contribution via the strap-in. No surprises there, but I was not called upon to explain why, thankfully. All this is quite serious, he added. As I'm sure you realize, there are usually repercussions to this kind of thing. However, there is a way out. He explained that there was room for manoeuvre before too much damage was done. I must make a formal request for a transfer. I get to keep my job. I was relieved to hear that, but I have to opt for a remote and little solicited place in some out-of-the-way region. Then the conversation took a completely unexpected and personal turn. His face became sorrowful as he told me that the managerial programs had recorded information about my relationship with Faye. Luckily, he was the only human manager who knew the details, for if the hierarchy had got wind that I had been seeing an outcast, I would have got into trouble, particularly since we met on site, and on more than one occasion. But Dennis seemed confident that I got away with it, and he had since encrypted the records, so that whole episode will remain undiscovered. I asked him if he knew where Faye was. He paused for some time, either trying to find the right words, or deciding whether to tell me the truth or not. Eventually he told me the truth, and when he did so, I realized why it hadn't been easy for him to confront me with it. "I warn you," he said sternly, "you may not like what you see." Then he waved his hand before a screen behind him. That screen came on, and it showed security footage of a man and a woman talking. The man I did not know, but the woman I did, as I had known no other. Faye was flirting with some lower stratum guy, wearing a street cleaning agency outfit from another conglomerate. I recognized the way she moved her arms and flicked her hair and twisted her legs in her short skirt. It was almost exactly the same way that she behaved with me at the beginning. I recognized the way he fell for it in exactly the same way I had fallen for it. "This scene took place 3 weeks ago," he commented, pointing to the date at the bottom of the screen. "You can imagine what they are doing together now." I could. "She has moved on," Dennis concluded. "I can only advise you to do likewise." I muttered a promise that I would, and added an inquisitive, floating, "But don't think about it. She can't help herself, and you certainly can't help her. She's deluded enough to think that if she commits herself totally to an ambitious cause, the aims of that cause are likely to be realized. She's lost. She has done this kind of thing no end of times, and will go on doing it for as long as it pleases her to do so, or for as long as she can." I was unable to say anything. As I sat there sunk in melancholy, Dennis explained that Faye presented a pathological case of getting high off a mixture of sexual/political philanthropy and serial seduction. She goes about from place to place, attempting to liberate lower stratum folk like me. The authorities know about her, but most of what she does is not strictly criminal. More to the point, she actually came from upper stratum stock, which was news to me, on her father's side, but she did not attain upper stratum status herself. In her teens she was confirmed as middle stratum like her mother. Her father, who otherwise has nothing to do with her, once intervened behind the scenes on her behalf to protect her when she got into trouble. Ever since, various official policing services have gone light on her, so as to avoid the awkward task of having to inform him. I was devastated to hear this. Me who had the temerity to think that I was special in her eyes, who had the temerity to hope that I was special. It was clear that she had made me think that I was worth more than I am. That was unfair of her. I suppose I was a ripe candidate to be taken for a ride, but I did enjoy the ride while it lasted. That gloom aside, Dennis did have some good news for me. I'm getting his top-of-the-range Japanese sex doll cast-off. I'm touched that he would do something like that for me. He showed her to me on the slipnet, and formally introduced me to her as her new owner. She can do all sorts of things. Her adjustable bum and boob size functionality is in perfect working order. She gave me a little hologram demonstration to prove it. I will now have the loving attention of 2 Meccano babes. He instructed her to get all her accessories ready to leave. I'll become a Meccano babe bigamist very shortly. But my story will have to end there, because Dennis is coming around with my new love doll to close down all my chrono transfer programs and take away the chrono equipment. I now have to sort out a few things on my home system in preparation for that, as well as for my job transfer. What is there left to say? I'm not going for a blow-up Pez after all. That's a bit of a relief. There's working life in me yet. My new proverb will not be just do it, so much as just stop to think about things before you go and do something stupid. I don't know if Dolly has already come up with that one. Maybe her new co-wife will store wisdom gems of that ilk. At least you have an idea about what the future holds in store for your grandchildren's children. I don't suppose it makes all that much of a difference to you when all's said and done. You'll be caught up in your own concerns. You'll still go on spoiling and despoiling the planet till it becomes the total mess that your children will have to sort out. You might take comfort in the knowledge that your descendants are more civilized than you. Having said that, I admit I did enjoy getting a little taste of your barbarism with the dissidents in the little green oasis. Even though I couldn't live like that, I'll always look back on my little retro-rebellion phase with fondness. The future can seem so big when you get a glimpse of the whole, and we can do precious little to mould it to our designs. But that big future is a composite of tiny little futures in which, whether we realise it or not, we are contributing to. Do all the little bits that we can do and do in our little corners make up for the rest that is too big for us to change? I don't know if that question can be answered, even with the benefit of hindsight. Epilogue. As you probably expected, the adventures of Norbert were orchestrated by me. I, effectively the puppet master of the venture, am named as Dennis throughout the above account, in which real names were systematically substituted for obvious reasons. Norbert was the principal subject of an experiment that had the objective of revealing areas of weaknesses in contemporary societal organization that are instructive for serious reflection on the direction that social management and design might take in the future. On a personal level, and I see no advantage in being coy about my intentions, this project forms a major part of my bid to integrate a top managerial team and to receive the extremely rare honour of being promoted to the upper stratum. Naturally, it is my hope that members of the Strata Management Board, to whom I address this epilogue, are not only enlightened by my thoughtful argument herein, but also that you will be impressed with the original way I have presented it. This document, coming from the past, acquires its full meaning in the present, where it effectively serves as an application for my social promotion. It is no secret that such a promotion is bordering on the impossible. Only extraordinary candidacies, which impact through their originality and technical prowess, are given serious scrutiny. To provide such a candidacy, I realized that I had to devise something exceptional to draw your attention to the potential I can bring to the responsibility of managing society. It is foremost my mastery of chronotransversal technology that lends credibility to my bid. Technical proficiency in this area has enabled me to send, through a chosen lower stratum agent, my message into the past of over a century ago. It arrived on the computer of an aspiring writer who published it as a work of fiction. The writer in question had no real option in this regard, for had he proclaimed that he received a gift from the future, he would have been taken for a lunatic. Thus, fact became fiction. Some time ago, I saw an old faded video clip of the author in his final years beaming about his invention. Indeed, this video may have sparked the idea for the present venture in my mind. I believe that he had got so used to saying that Norbert's autobiography was his own brainchild that he ended up believing that Norbert was his creation. When prospecting potential authorial candidates, I saw that this one was both lazy and busy. I deduced that he would have neither the time nor the energy to make anything more than a few modifications to the original text. On the whole, the author played his part loyally in our implicit pact. After some searching, I eventually found this text in its original published format, which I am sending to you pretty much as it stands. As one would expect, these very words in this epilogue that I drafted are on the pages attributed to this author of a bygone age. Although fully cognizant of the ability of my chronotransversality engineering achievements' capacity to impress, I realize that I must also convince through a demonstration of my ability to understand human motivation. I have made sure that this novella/CV provides proof that I am equipped to be a highly competent social designer serving the interests of social stability. I am aware that some upper strata already know about my novella/CV, albeit they are understandably skeptical. I have arranged it so that they will find it very difficult to identify Norman or Dennis on their own. However, when I amass the corroborating data, they will learn that future fact was foretold with exactitude in fiction. Theoretically, I could have sent information about events that were yet to happen, so that they could have been accurately predicted before occurring. But such an approach was to be rejected outright, since it would have gone against the strict ethics of the small circle of those who have attained a real headway in the mastery of the highly complex technology of chronotransversality. Those ethics forbid the attempt to manipulate previous events by informing past actors of event-sensitive future outcomes. I am not in the business of vandalizing history. I seek, rather, to improve the management of society. Thus, I followed the journal closely before every chronodisplacement to check that it contained only anodyne information. The novella CV is not without certain amusing ironies. Like Norbert's delusionary belief, articulated at the outset, that the idea of his journal came from himself. Beyond the amusement factor, I was in the earnest business of illustrating my competence in the most refined available mental suggestion programming, which enabled me to place an action-inducing suggestion into his mind while he was in the midst of his marketing brain disposition cells. The true mark of success of modulated action-inducing suggestion technology comes when the subject takes the idea to come entirely from his own thought processes, as was the case here. It is to be hoped that social designers will appreciate the results of the Norbert-Fay pairing. This aspect of the project, which I call the Adam-Eve experiment after the Christian myth, did not originate entirely from myself. I chanced upon the discovery that Fay was an ongoing subject of an SOSP, Social Overseeing Systems program. The SOSP, which was automatically triggered by her deviant behavior, seeks to record and gather data in order to refine social management programming systems' understanding of partnerships involving physical intimacy. Specifically, it is trying to determine when and how what is called the Eden fall-off point occurs, when sexual novelty gives way to predictability. Such research is sponsored by doll manufacturers who seek to improve the simulation of real behaviors. As usually occurs in such cases, Fay was unaware she had become the subject of a programmed experiment. I did not impede the SOSP, but rather worked in tandem with it when choosing Norbert to encounter Fay. I sought to test how Norbert would react to the temptation of life as an outcast, Fay serving as bait in this procedure. Incidentally, neither subject came off badly. Norbert broadened the horizon of his experience, while Fay had the euphoric impression, albeit based on narcissistic self-deception, of having her nature fetish worldview being spread among the social stratum that she neither understands nor respects. I was interested in finding out how far the tangential factor of sexual infatuation impinges on a lower stratum susceptibility to be drawn into dissidence. As one would predict, given the short duration of the two subjects' relationship, this infatuation was not translated into total ideological conversion. Norbert adopted the outcast worldview while enjoying the bait. Once the bait was removed, his ideological interest faded into the background. Norbert's failure to leave his conventional existence demonstrates that the social integration of the lowest stratum into the stratum system is generally a consolidated achievement of social design and management. Nonetheless, I was surprised by how modified his outlook became. The exotic world of outcasts made a deep impression on him, and some of their subversive discourse was spontaneously recalled when he made visual contact with his CE owner. I will return below to the implications of this potential weakness in ideological adherence, which is indubitably of concern for social design. I would like at this point to make some observations about outcasts. Their paranoid vision of the world is coloured by a basic reality that underlies their illusory freedom. Namely, that their very freedom, defined as the perimeters of their action and the space they frequent, is mapped out by the authorities they imagine themselves to act independently of. It makes sense in terms of holistic social management to accord such social agents a breathing space. By and large, they are products of failed reprogramming. Most of them come from the middle stratum, and so are often spared much of the persistent and thorough reprogramming that the lower strata tend to undergo. The tacit social design consensus has it that there will always be a certain percentage of social misfits. Rather than forcing them kicking and screaming into standard re-education programs that persistently fail, it is better to corral them into observable spaces in outzones. This has the additional advantage of gauging conformity levels in society as a whole. Any observed expansion of their numbers serves as a warning that societal adjustments are called for. This social management utility aside, it is nonetheless regrettable that we have, in essence, given up on outcasts. The present experiment demonstrates that lower strata can be induced to the temptation of life as an outcast under controlled conditions. A series of trials that reverse the process could be very useful in enabling us to redesign readjustment programs suited to their personal needs. Ultimately, outcasts constitute a social inefficiency shortfall. They are an untapped resource that many social designers hitherto have been content to see as an inevitable byproduct of the societal whole. In contrast to such unduly pessimistic resignation, I am convinced that more imagination could be fruitfully put into recycling this societal waste. The outcast's belief that the upper stratum conspiratorially sucks out the energy of the lower stratum for their benefit constitutes a highly skewed world vision that sustains a self-justificatory motivational framework of a subgroup. Such ideological anamorphic fantasies miss the point that social managers' primary interest is the stabilization of the societal whole, which is of immediate interest to all strata. The unfortunate truth is that, far from overexploiting the lower stratum, we are unable to harness productively their neuro or biological contributions. Lower strata are net takers of the global ergo-energetic flow stock. Although middle strata are net contributors, their contribution is not large enough to make a dent in the deficit of the lower stratum. With the increasing efficiency of automated ergo-energetic saving systems, there is a danger that their idleness will increase. This will mean that it will be difficult to sustain the illusion that they are really useful to the social whole, even while a certain number of them are still indispensable. The problem is basically demographic. Existing long-term projects to reduce the demographic weight of the lower strata are lacking in ambition. This uncorrected disequilibrium does not yet affect the overall harmony of society, but is likely to do so in the future. The strata system, which is the greatest human achievement in social engineering in the lifespan of our species, is basically sound. The upper stratum is protected from the intrusion of middle strata because the middle stratum is too busy, on the one hand, fighting off stratum demotion, and, on the other hand, worrying about the lower strata claiming some of the advantages they are excluded from. For their part, the lower strata thank their lucky stars they are not radiplazers, who are in no position to make any demands. The system works well, but it is not without imperfections that ought not to be complacently overlooked. The fact that middle strata work so hard to create a firewall so that adult lower strata do not aspire to leave their status, thus making it more competitive as individuals to maintain their middle stratum status, entails the side effect of a steady demotion trickle from middle stratum to lower stratum. This not only vitiates the planned demographic decrease of the lower stratum, it also results in the addition of better caliber individuals to the lower stratum, which has become progressively more sophisticated than was formerly assumed. In sum, a qualitative increase in the intellectual capacity of the lower stratum may generate widespread questioning of the system as a whole, questioning of the kind that is more typically the prerogative of outcast types stemming largely from the middle stratum. This has the potential to stoke resentment among the lower stratum. My studies indicate the ease with which a lower stratum can have its assumptions about the soundness of the social system shaken. Ideological adherence to the social whole is surprisingly fragile. If many lower stratum members were to lose their faith in the present social order at the same time and were to form the capacity to mobilize, the result would be social disorder. We would find ourselves in the kind of situation that has not been seen in these parts for many decades. When the last revolt occurred around 25 years ago, the solution was to relegate a core rebellious zone to radioplas status. This was extremely traumatic for society as a whole. Such drastic measures can only be avoided through a speeded-up population reduction of the lower stratum. Naturally, I am aware that implementing this solution means countering ABPs, automatic birthing programs, and challenging the highly influential Real Mother Syndicate. Modifying ABPs is difficult to achieve technically. I hope my competence in chrono-transversal technology demonstrates that if there is an efficient way to introduce vital human-inspired modifications in the parameters of ABPs or any of the other mechanized social automation programming, I am equipped to carry out the task. Persuading a human organization like the Real Mother Syndicate to change its course is a different matter. The syndicate's advocates claim that a substantial number of lower strata members are necessary in order to sustain the motivation of the middle stratum and maintain the dynamism of society as a whole. This claim is highly exaggerated. A smaller population level of lower stratum members would perform this vital function just as well. Most observers agree that capital accumulation reached total saturation point around 50 years ago, and the mechanization of labor and services meant that the redundancy of manpower was going to be a great social challenge. So far, none of the attempts to make redundant consumers pay for what they consume by siphoning their bioenergy have lived up to the optimism of their original proponents, outcost paranoia notwithstanding. The overwhelming majority of lower strata accept their position in their comfortable but prospectless carriage of the social train. But one day they might not be so docile. This is why it is imperative to reduce the lower stratum stock. But winning a theoretical argument is of little use when the Real Mother Syndicate can compensate for the weakness of its advocacy by means of its extensive connections throughout upper stratum networks. What is needed is a cautiously concerted campaign of long-term persuasion that disseminates the message among both top and middle strata managers that this reform is necessary and that it would be far more painless to act sooner rather than later. The promotion of this narrative should occur in a veiled and coded language. The last thing anyone wants is for lower strata members to fill in the dots themselves and realize that their social role is to serve as a spur to middle strata efforts to maintain their status. This kind of social design used to be carried out on a regular basis, and it may seem a somewhat outmoded technique in an age of neuroconnectivity. Nonetheless, the basic idea can be fruitfully applied to our present context. An increased pace in the diminution of the lower strata members would require global cooperation. This is a slow process. Fortunately, the days are behind us in which private interests were able to deplete the rich sources this planet once harbored, without a thought to future generations. Nevertheless, international coordination is a long and clumsy process, so hearts and minds must be thoroughly won to the idea of this demographic project before concrete proposals are promoted at a global level. In conclusion, I wish to express my awareness that this venture in the form of the present document is not without risk, but I take that risk willingly. A life without risk is no life at all. It would be the kind of serviceable existence of a Norbert. I was not born to that kind of existence. Nor was I born for the life in the middle stratum, in which I happen to have been born. My talents have made me the right kind of metal to serve vigorously the interests of societal management in a team of upper stratum managers. Even the upper stratum has to renew itself through the injection of new blood from among the best of the middle stratum, on rare occasions. Failure to do so would lead to the enervation of that class and the fragility of their long-term standing. Since the first great managerial programming automation phase, when those highest up in society were able to take advantage of the fixing of society into strata and solidify the barrier around their own enclave at the top, social ascension into that level is a well-nigh Sisyphean task. However, an upper stratum that excludes the brightest hope from below will inevitably face challenges from middle strata, who will try to recuperate some of the controls and checks that their forebears once enjoyed. The occasional opening of the gilded doors from within is the best way to ensure that they are not battered down from without. Whether my bid is accepted or not will remain outside the parameters of the present text. My past cast silence will either be due to having been welcomed into the fold of the upper stratum, or having been silenced by their wrath. Thank you for listening to this audiobook by Scott Waller. If you enjoyed it, please consider purchasing it on Amazon. Link shown. If you did not enjoy it, and you managed to reach this stage, I think a period of lengthy introspection is due.